A false denunciation is a signal that starts a chain reaction. I didn't understand that when I was 28. Back then I thought lies were small things. Sharp things, sure, but small. Something you used to tilt the table when life had already been cheating you. My name's William. I'm writing this because enough years have passed that I can finally look at it without flinching every second. Not because I'm proud of it. I'm not. But people tell crime stories like they happen in one explosive moment. A gun, a shout, a siren. Mine didn't start like that. Mine started with paperwork, resentment, and a sentence spoken too casually over bad coffee. At the time I was working maintenance for a warehouse on the edge of town. Not glamorous. Long nights, freezing concrete floors in winter, the kind of place where nobody remembered your birthday but everyone noticed if you were 5 minutes late. I'd been there 4 years. Long enough to believe that counted for something. Then Derek showed up. He was 24, clean boots, straight teeth, management trainee. The kind of guy who said, team culture, while people twice his age were hauling broken pallets in the rain. He liked me at first because I fixed problems quietly. Then 1 month inventory went sideways, expensive electronics missing, numbers not matching, supervisors panicking. Guess whose name started floating around? Mine. Nobody accused me directly. Not at first. But I saw it happen. Conversation stopping when I walked into the break room. My manager asking weirdly specific questions. Security suddenly checking my backpack every night. You don't need someone to call you a thief out loud. Sometimes a room can do it for them. And that's where the anger started. I kept telling myself I'd clear it up. That someone would realize the numbers were wrong or the shipment logs were screwed up. Instead, Derek wrote up a report. He said he was documenting irregular behavior. That phrase still sticks in my teeth. Irregular behavior. Translation: William looks tired, keeps to himself, and knows where everything is stored. That false denunciation didn't ruin me immediately. It just changed the way I started thinking. For the first time in my life, I looked around that warehouse and stopped seeing shelves. I started seeing opportunity. I spent about 2 weeks pretending nothing had changed. That was the strange part. Outwardly I was still William from maintenance, same stained jacket, same lunch in a plastic container, same nod to the night guard. Inside, though, everything had shifted half an inch. Once people decide you might be guilty, you start noticing how much trust actually holds a place together. Doors left unlocked. Codes written on clipboards. People assuming you belong because they've seen your face long enough. At first I told myself I only wanted proof. I wanted to know who was really moving inventory. But anger has a way of dressing itself up as logic. I started paying attention. Derek left around 6:30 every evening. The warehouse manager smoked behind the loading bay at exactly 9. Camera 3 near receiving had a dead angle that lasted maybe 7 seconds whenever forklifts passed. I knew that because I timed it with my watch 3 nights in a row. That was the moment observation became preparation. And once I crossed that line, it stopped feeling accidental. I didn't decide in one dramatic instant that I was going to steal. It settled in slowly, the way rain soaks through a coat before you notice you're wet. The warehouse handled tablets, phones, small medical scanners, expensive things packed in dull cardboard. Easy to move, easy to resell, easy to explain away if numbers were already drifting. That was the ugly logic that kept repeating in my head. If they already believed I was involved, what exactly was left to protect? I started building a routine. Not a plan yet, at least that's what I called it. I memorized which pallets were counted manually, and which ones were only checked at weekly audit. I borrowed a duplicate receiving key from a supervisor's ring while helping him clear a jammed shutter, pressed it into wax, and had a copy cut 2 days later across town. The whole time I felt sick doing it. That surprised me. I'd expected anger. Instead it was this cold, steady awareness that every small step made the next one easier. That scared me more than getting caught. By the 3rd week, it stopped feeling theoretical. I picked a night when shipments were heavy, controlled chaos. 2 trucks arriving late, one already behind schedule, supervisors juggling clipboards and phone calls. Noise covers a lot of things. So does urgency. I told myself I'd only test it. Just one item. Something small enough that it could vanish into existing discrepancies. That was the line I drew, like that made it cleaner. Around 8:47 p.m., I moved toward receiving with a pallet jack, same as always. No one stopped me. No one even looked twice. That was the part that hit hardest, how invisible routine makes you. I timed the camera without thinking now. 7 seconds, just like before. I cut open a box, slid one sealed unit into my jacket, resealed it with tape from my pocket. Hands steady, breathing controlled. It felt less like stealing and more like performing a task I'd rehearsed too many times in my head. Then I walked away. No alarms. No shouting. That silence felt louder than anything. The first real problem came 10 minutes later, and it was so stupid I almost laughed. Marta from shipping stopped me near the side corridor. She wasn't suspicious by nature, which somehow made it worse. She just frowned and asked why I was heading toward the employee lockers when receiving was backed up. Ordinary question. Harmless. But when you're hiding something, every casual sentence sounds like a spotlight. I felt the box against my ribs under the jacket. Suddenly it seemed enormous. I told her I'd sliced my palm on broken plastic wrap and needed a bandage. Then I held up my hand like proof. There wasn't any blood. For 1 second I thought I'd blown it. Marta stared at me, then said, "You okay? You look pale." That almost broke me. Not accusation, concern. I muttered something about not sleeping, kept walking, and forced myself not to hurry. My legs felt detached from me, like they belonged to someone else. At the locker I stood there shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. I should have stopped after that. That's the part one still replay. I got home, set the sealed box on my kitchen table, and just stared at it for almost an hour. It didn't look dramatic. No movie moment. Just brown cardboard under yellow light, next to unpaid bills and a chipped coffee mug. But it changed the room. It changed me. I opened it carefully. Brand new tablet, untouched packaging, worth more than half a week of my wages. My hands were still trembling, but now there was something else mixed in, relief, disbelief, a kind of ugly triumph. I kept thinking, that's it? That was all it took? The next morning nobody said anything. That silence was dangerous. It turned fear into confidence. By the end of the week I'd convinced myself the first time had proven something, not that I could steal, but that the whole place was careless enough to deserve it. That's how people justify crossing a second line. They call it proof instead of temptation. A week later it stopped being about one tablet. I had started watching patterns the way other people watch weather. Which supervisor counted personally, which one signed off without looking, which truck crews rushed because they wanted to get home. Once you study a place long enough, you stop seeing people and start seeing openings. That was the ugliest change in me. I picked Friday. End of month. Inventory pressure everywhere. This time I took 3 units, not 1. 2 tablets and a compact medical scanner. I had already cleared space behind old maintenance supplies in my locker and brought a second jacket with deeper inside pockets. It sounds obsessive now, and it was. Every detail mattered because details kept panic under control. Halfway through, Derek appeared. He came around the corner talking into his phone, then stopped when he saw me crouched by an open carton. My heart hit so hard I felt it in my throat. He asked what I was doing. I said the pallet had split, and I was checking for damage. He looked at me for a second too long. Then he nodded. And walked away. That should have ended it for me, but instead it made everything worse. The next afternoon Derek asked me to step into the office. Not, "When you have a minute." Not casual. Just that flat management tone that makes your stomach tighten before you sit down. He closed the door and started talking about inventory discrepancies. Nothing direct at first, missing units, incomplete paperwork, chain of custody issues. Then he looked at me and said he needed to know if I'd noticed anything unusual. I remember hearing the fluorescent light buzzing above us. That's what panic does. It makes stupid details enormous. I said no. He kept watching me. Not angry. Careful. He said Marta mentioned I'd looked sick the previous Friday, and security had seen me at the lockers twice during receiving hours. My mouth went dry. Then he added something I didn't expect. He said, "William, if something's going on, tell me now before this becomes bigger than you think." That sentence landed harder than any accusation. Because for 1 second, I almost did. I didn't confess. I lied so smoothly it scared me afterward. I told Derek I'd been under pressure because my mother's rent had gone up and I'd been picking up extra maintenance work on weekends. I said I looked sick because I hadn't been sleeping. Then I added the part that still makes me wince. I reminded him about the report he'd written. Told him ever since that false accusation, every ordinary thing I did suddenly looked suspicious. That changed the room. He leaned back a little. His face shifted from scrutiny to uncertainty. Nobody wants to be the person who wrongly ruins somebody's livelihood. I could see him recalculating. That was the first time I understood how powerful a half-truth can be. My mother did need help. I wasn't sleeping. But I was using real pain to protect a lie. He let me leave. Out in the corridor, my legs felt weak with relief, but it didn't last. By the end of that shift, I noticed 2 things. Security was watching the receiving floor more closely, and people were talking quieter when I walked past. That was when the chain reaction really started. 3 days later, Marta got called into the office. Then one of the forklift guys. Then the evening receiver. Nobody said much out loud, but everyone knew management was trying to pin down where the missing inventory was going. The warehouse changed overnight. Bags inspected. Clipboards checked twice. People snapping at each other over paperwork. And then I heard the part that made my stomach drop. Someone said Marta might get suspended. Apparently, because she'd signed off a transfer sheet on the same night units disappeared. It was routine, she probably hadn't even looked closely. But suddenly her name was attached to it. I remember standing there holding a box of light fixtures while 2 guys near loading talked about whether she was careless or involved. That was the first moment I felt actual guilt instead of fear. Marta had only asked if I was okay. Now she was the one getting dragged into it. I wanted to tell somebody. I really did. But confession didn't feel noble anymore. It felt like lighting another match in a room already filling with gas. That night I drove home with the radio off and the scanner in the trunk feeling heavier than metal should. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing Marta's face in that corridor, not suspicious, just worried. By morning I'd convinced myself there was still a way to contain it. Not confess. Just erase the evidence. If the missing items turned up somewhere inside the warehouse, maybe management would call it a counting error and stop digging. That was the plan I built at 3 in the morning. I came in early, almost 40 minutes before shift. Used the duplicate key, slipped through receiving, and headed for the back storage area where damaged pallets sat waiting for audit. My hands were cold enough that I dropped one of the boxes twice. I had just shoved the scanner behind shrink-wrapped cleaning supplies when I heard footsteps. Not 1 person. 2. Voices getting closer. For a second I froze so completely I could hear my own breathing. Then Derek said my name. Not loud. Not angry. Just close. Much closer than I wanted. I turned around and saw Derek with Paul from security standing half a dozen feet away. Nobody moved for a second. Derek looked past me at the open storage cage, then at the box on the floor near my boot. I could actually feel my pulse in my throat. My brain started throwing useless ideas at me. Run, talk, laugh it off, but my body just stood there. Paul asked what I was doing in restricted storage before shift. I said I'd heard a noise near receiving and came to check it. The second it left my mouth I knew how weak it sounded. Paul's expression didn't change. Derek looked disappointed more than suspicious, which somehow cut deeper. Then Paul stepped past me and crouched near the cleaning pallets. He didn't even have to search. The scanner was visible through torn plastic wrap. Nobody shouted. That made it worse. Derek just exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face. He said quietly, "William, why?" I wish I had some clean answer. I didn't. Standing there, every explanation suddenly sounded small and pathetic. Even to me. I didn't break immediately. That's another ugly truth. Even with the scanner sitting there and Paul already calling someone on his radio, part of me kept trying to salvage control. I said I'd found the box hidden there, and panicked because I knew people already suspected me. I said I was trying to check it before anyone else saw. It was desperate, thin, almost insulting. Paul didn't argue. He just asked me to empty my locker. That walk felt longer than the entire warehouse. Marta was near shipping when we passed. She looked up, saw Paul beside me, saw my face, and understood enough. She didn't say anything. That silence hit harder than handcuffs would have. In the locker they found the extra jacket, the tape, and 2 sealed tablets wrapped inside an old maintenance tarp. That was the moment the story collapsed. Not because of evidence, because I stopped being able to pretend to myself. I sat down on the concrete floor and finally told the truth. Not all of it at once. But enough. The police came, but not with sirens or drama. Just 2 tired officers asking practical questions while I sat in that little office I'd walked past for years. By then the adrenaline had burned off. I felt hollow, almost detached, like I was listening to somebody else explain my life badly. Because it was a first offense, and the total value stayed under a certain threshold, I wasn't taken away that night. There were charges, restitution, court dates, probation. My lawyer called it a fortunate outcome. It didn't feel fortunate. The hardest part happened a week later when I went back to collect the last of my things. Marta was outside smoking. I tried to apologize. I told her I never meant for her name to get dragged into it. She looked at me for a long second and said, "You didn't just steal inventory, William. You made everyone doubt each other." That stayed with me more than the sentence did. Because she was right. The real damage spread further than the boxes. It's been years now. I work somewhere else. Smaller place, different town, no warehouse floors, no clipboards, no cameras humming above loading bays. Most days I can go hours without thinking about it. Then some small thing, the smell of cardboard, fluorescent lights, somebody asking where I was 5 minutes ago, pulls it all back. What changed wasn't just that I got caught. It was realizing how ordinary the road there felt. People imagine criminals wake up different. Most of the time, at least in my case, it was resentment, then justification, then one compromise that made the next compromise easier. By the time I recognized myself clearly, I'd already dragged other people into it. So that's my warning. A false denunciation can start a chain reaction, but what you do next is still yours. If someone treats you unfairly, fight it in daylight. Put things on record. Speak plainly. Don't answer suspicion by becoming exactly what they suspected. You may survive the consequences. Living with the version of yourself you created is harder.